Welcome back, guys. It's Israel. Today I'm going to be going over MongoDB and how you can use it with a .NET API. The version of .NET we're using today is .NET 7, but I really just wanted to dive in and see how we can use the most popular non-relational database out there with a .NET API. So let's go over what is MongoDB, and then we can actually dive into the project. But finally, I wanted to thank my channel members for making videos like these possible. And if you also want to see your name up here, check the link in the description for how you can also become a member and all the other cool perks that come with it. But now, let's dive in. Well, first, I just wanted to talk about what is MongoDB. Well, according to the 2023 Stack Overflow survey, MongoDB is the most popular non-relational database used professionally, and it's not even close when you see all the other options. So as you can see, a bunch of just relational databases, all the SQL ones. Then you finally see MongoDB right here. Then you have Redis Cache, you have another relational database, Elasticsearch, then finally you get to Amazon's proprietary NoSQL, but it's not even close when you compare them, and then Oracle. So again, MongoDB is by far the most used professionally when it comes to non-relational databases. So again, just some more information on it. It is a non-relational database, which means it stores its data in documents, and it is schemaless. And instead of using tables, they specifically use collections. Instead of JSON, they use BSON, I think, but honestly, they look extremely identical. So if you've seen JSON, you'll be able to read this too. There are no real joins, and it's actively encouraged. You can do a version of it called lookup, but again, it's very much discouraged. You're more encouraged to embed as much data as possible in a single document. Doesn't matter if the documents in the same collection have different data in it. That's the beauty of MongoDB. You do not have a schema. You can put whatever you want in a given document, and it can be different from the other ones. But again, that flexibility, it allows you to store what you need and what you want, and it doesn't matter. You're not locked into a pattern. And because of how it indexes and stores its data, MongoDB is faster than traditional relational databases. It is also horizontally scalable because you can easily just add more servers to a cluster, and that increases the load of traffic and accept, as well as the amount of data it can store. So the real question is, how should you design your MongoDB schema? Well, these are straight from Mongo themselves, so don't come at me. These are the general rules for MongoDB design. Rule 1, favor embedding unless there is a compelling reason not to. This is what I was saying. You might as well put that list inside of your object. Put all the data that you need. Don't leave it for another table. You're doing documents. Documents want to have as much data in them. Embed it. Just put it in there, and then once you pull it, then you can extract all the information that you need from the given model that you assigned to that document. Rule 2, needing to access an object on its own is a compelling reason not to embed it. So again, if it's something that's not directly correlated to whatever this document is, and you're probably going to need it on your own, then you can go ahead and make a new collection. Rule 3, avoid joins and lookups if possible, but don't be afraid if they can provide a better schema design. So I'm sure you'll come around times where you actually might need lookup or a join for some different reason, and it is there, but again, they encourage you to just embed as much as possible. Rule 4, arrays should not grow without bound. If there are more than a couple hundred documents on the many side, don't embed them. If there are more than a few thousand documents on the many side, don't use an array of object ID references. High cardinality arrays are compelling reason not to embed. So again, right there, it's again, just keep track of what you're embedding and what you're storing, and don't let it get, too out of control as well. And rule 5, as always with MongoDB, how you model your data depends entirely on your particular application's data access patterns. You want to structure your data to match the ways that your application queries and updates it. This is again going back to MongoDB being extremely flexible and allowing you to really customize it to be just exactly what you need. If you need something for your application where the objects that you could receive could be very different, could change. Some could have information, some could lack some could have more, some could be different. So, and in that case, maybe MongoDB and a non-relational database is for you. And at that point, you can really customize it to exactly what you need. So that is the beauty of MongoDB. But now we've kind of gone over what is MongoDB, how to do your schema, and all of that stuff. Now let's actually dive into the project, and let me show you how to actually hook up MongoDB with your .NET API. So now that we're at the project, I've just created a blank .NET API right here. So the first thing we're going to want to do is go ahead and install MongoDB. So you're going to want to go to mongodb.com/try/download/community. And when you do that, it is going to open up a window that looks like this. And you're going to want to scroll down here and download whatever version that you need. So for me, it was the Windows version. You're going to be downloading MongoDB Compass. So it'll be this. It'll look like this icon right here. And once you have it downloaded, it will look something like this. So it should be a very easy install. It's just a basic installer. You should go through, do all the defaults, and at the end of the day, you're going to see something like this. Once it finally opens up, you're going to see your MongoDB Compass open. You're going to see that you have this new connection to your local MongoDB deployment right here. You can just go ahead and connect to it, and it should be blank in y'all's case. In mine, it's not blank because I've already been working with it. You can go ahead and adjust what you want here, but you want to go ahead and create a new database. So you create here, put your database name, put the name of your first collection, and then just create the database. Once you do that, you should see something like this. I created a database that's called NBA. So it is going to be for NBA teams and their players, and just a little bit of information, just so we can have a little bit of information nested and not just have a flat object. I wanted to have like an array or something inside of it, so that there's a little bit more complexity in this. So we have an actual list. So once you have that created, I went ahead and had my NBA database, and then I already created one for teams. I already have two objects in here, and let me go ahead and show you guys the objects. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to just expand them. So when you create them, you don't have to put an ID. It'll do that automatically. So I did the Bulls and the Mavericks because I'm a Bulls fan and I live in Dallas. So I have, like I said, right here, the team name, the conference that they're in, and then I have a list of players inside of them. So I just have 3 players: Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Alex Caruso, and their numbers. So that is going to be a list inside of just a flat object. And I have the exact same thing for the Mavericks. So let me just expand these objects down here. So again, you're going to have the team is the Mavs, Conference Western, and then a list of players. So Luka Doncic, 77, Kyrie Irving, 11, Tim Hardaway Jr., 10. So that is the database that I have, and this is going to be the one that I'm using, and this is going to be the basis for the models that I'm creating as well. But this is going to be the data that we're going to be using for our project, and this is all the setup that you need to really do here. If you guys obviously want in the future, come back, add in more collections, you just press the plus button, and then you add in your other collection or stuff like that. But again, this is what I was saying earlier, where it's more recommended that you embed and you just have these bigger objects than to, let's say, create a players table or players collection like you would do in a relational database, because it's encouraged to just have them in here. So you just pull the big object, and then in the model, once you get them back, and we're going to see that in the API, you're going to have quick access to the players already. You don't need to do separate calls. You're just making one call and you're getting that big object already. So quickly, just make a note of this path because we're going to need it later. But now let's go back to the project and start setting things up. Now that we're back at the project, the first thing that we want to do is we want to go ahead and install MongoDB. So we're going to go to our NuGet package. We're going to add the NuGet package for MongoDB. So we're going to browse, and we're going to do MongoDB. So the one that we're going to want is this MongoDB.driver. So we're going to go ahead and install that. And I'll be right back when it's done. Now that we have it installed, I need to go ahead and just create a few things. So I'm going to go into my controllers first and just add a new controller. It's just going to be empty. It's going to be called my NBA controller because that is the name of my database. So it's going to be NBA controller. Let's create that. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and create this helper folder right here. So I'm going to go helper. And inside of it, I'm going to create a model. And that model is going to be for my MongoDB settings. So we're going to go here, create a new item. It's going to be called MongoDB settings. Open that. And inside of here, we're going to have a few things. And by that, just 2 things. It's basically just going to be the connection URL and then the name of the database. So with that being said, now that we have this, we need to go add that to our app settings. So in our app settings, what we're going to do, and remember that I told you to earlier pay attention to that localhost path to your MongoDB. So open your app settings, and then up here, you can just add in your MongoDB connection URL, and then in my case, the database name. You don't have to put it in here. You could use it later on in what we're going to see, but it's just a little bit more helpful to just pull it really quick. And in the player model, we're going to have just a name and a number. Cool, we're good here. And now that this is done, we can go ahead and create a model for our team. So new item, team. And now for our team model, we are going to have the following. We're going to have the ID, the team, which is going to be a string, conference is a string, and a list of players with that player model. So as you see up here, you see something a little different. We again have bson, I think that's how you pronounce it. And then we have this bson representation of an object ID. This basically is just telling MongoDB that we are going to accept a string, and then you can just convert it automatically to an object ID, so that it allows us to do that and doesn't throw some type of error. So that's what this is for. And then this is basically just saying that this is its kind of primary key, just like you would do in, a normal relational database. So now the next thing that we need to go ahead and create is our actual service. So with that being said, now we have all this information here. Let's go and create our service. So I'm going to go and create this folder right here. It's going to be services. And we are going to create another item. And this one's going to be called MongoDB service. Service, if I can spell. And inside of here, we're going to have a good amount of code, but I'll walk you guys through exactly what's going on. So first things first, let me import this. And now that we have this all set, let me explain what's actually going on here. So first thing is obviously this is the MongoDB service. Right here, we are essentially setting that we're going to be pulling a team collection of team from the iMongo collection. This is basically the Mongo interface that's telling us what we're going to go grab from the database. We're initializing that inside of here. We're then going to go into the constructor. We are going to set the Mongo client. This is basically the initial part of starting that connection with our Mongo database. So we're going to create the client, and then we're going to go grab that connection URL from your app settings, remember? And that's why we have this, the MongoDB settings model. Then in the next part, we're going to go grab the database. And now finally here, you're going to go and grab your collection, and then you're going to pass in the name of your collection, which I said you could technically do in the model and then set that in the app settings as well. I just chose not to do it. And let's say you had another collection. Let's say if I would have made that players collection that I didn't end up doing, you'd have this, and then you would set this, and then you would have your collections here to work with from your database. So that's what's going on here. Let me get rid of this. And then inside of here, you're setting up the actual functionality of your methods and what they're going to do when you actually call them and retrieve what information you want from the database. So we're going to have this get async right here. This one's basically going to get all of our teams, just a list of teams. Get async by ID is going to use a string ID, and that is going to be passed in, and we're going to get one team. Here, we're going to be able to create a team. So essentially, we're calling the team collection, and we're going to go insert a new team. Then we're going to use a string to update and pass in the updated team. And we're going to go replace it wherever the ID matches and just replace it. So basically, you have your document. You're just going to slap the new document on top of it. And now the old one's gone. You only have the new one. So that's essentially what you're doing there with the replace one async. And then again, you're going to get to your delete async. You're going to get a string ID. And the obvious thing, you're going to delete one async where the ID is at. So that's very self-explanatory. Now the next thing before I go to my controller is I want to go to my program.cs because we have to add a few things. We have to configure the services for our MongoDB. So right here, I'm going to add this, configure the services for the MongoDB settings. And this is this. And then we're going to set the get section for the MongoDB, which is basically the string in the configuration section of the app settings file. And it's going to get that connection string. The next thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to add a singleton for our MongoDB service so that we can inject that in wherever we're going to use it. And that's actually all we have to do here. Now let's go to our MBA controller. So now let's start filling up our MBA controller. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to set it as an API controller and then set the route to it. We're going to change controller to controller base. Then we're going to set the MongoDB service up here at the top. So we're going to put that in here. Then we are going to set it in the constructor. So now we have our MBA controller constructor, and we're going to set that in here. So we are setting our MongoDB service and we are initializing it. Now we're going to move down here and we're going to do our HTTP GET. So our HTTP GET is going to be very straightforward. It's just going to be a GET, await, MongoDB service, get async, and we're good to go there. We're just getting a list and we're bringing it back. Very straightforward. Next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to do our get by ID. So again, a get, passing in the ID, calling the MongoDB service get async by ID, that if we remember is this one right here, where it basically goes to the team collection and it's going to find it by ID and return first or default. So back to the controller. That's all we're doing here. Next thing, we're going to do the HTTP post create async. And that code is the following. The HTTP post create async. We're going to pass in a team object. We're going to go to the MongoDB service create async, which calls this, and then it inserts one. And then we come back and we return a created at action, and we're just going to pass back the ID and the team that was created. Now moving on, we're going to do the edit or the HTTP put. That one is going to be called update. We're going to pass in the string of the team that we're going to update, and then the updated team object. And we're going to call get async by ID to retrieve the object that we're going to replace, take that ID, update it, and then we're going to call update async. And that's again, just going to go to here and replace it. So remember, that's what's going on there. And finally, we have our HTTP delete. So that's going to be our delete right here. We're going to pass in a string. We are going to go fetch a team, make sure that it's there, because if not, we're going to be deleting nothing. So once we make sure that it is actually there, then we're going to go in and call delete async, which will go in to right here and delete one based on the ID that we're passing in. And that's all the code that we need in our controller. And while we do have all the code here, I do want to show you guys what I meant earlier by you can use joins or do a lookup is what it's called here. So let me just open up a new tab and let me show you guys what I'm talking about. So if we go here, I can show you guys what I mean by you can use joins and stuff like that. But like I said earlier, they're really frowned upon and they don't want you to do that. They want you to just embed so that you don't have to do joins. But you can do them, and I can show you guys right here. So again, what I was mentioning is that lookup. And it's basically just a group join that you can do, very similar to how you do like the query method with just link queries and stuff, the query syntax, I mean. And with that being said, you can just call it in this way, and then you can go and it'll work in the same way as it would with any type of join when you actually go to MongoDB and execute. So you can do that here, and I'll leave a link to this in the description. But I didn't really want to go too deep into this because, again, they really discourage it, and they really want you to actually just use the embedding and just putting as much data into your document so that you don't need to do this. Like I said, in the rules that they gave and I gave at the beginning that, it's really encouraged to embed, and there could be situations where you can use a lookup. And I think that's why it exists as like a functionality that you can use. But again, it is really discouraged. And if you've been enjoying this video and found it helpful, please drop a like on this video so I can spread to more developers on YouTube. Thank you. Okay, so now that the API is running, let's start with the first one. So the first one is basically the get all. So we didn't give it a name over here, so it's just API/MBA. So we're going to open this, try it out, and it's just going to pull in all the data. So we're going to scroll down here, and we can see that it gave us back all the information from the Chicago Bulls and all the information for the Dallas Mavericks, including the player information inside of here. And if you needed to access the player information, you would, as you see, go into your team model, and then you would have the access to all the players. So you would have very quick access to all that information if you needed it. But that is getting all the information that we had here for both of our objects. Next up, let's say that we want the Chicago Bulls information because I'm a Bulls fan and that's what I want to do. So we're going to go grab the object ID. We're going to try it out, and we're going to put it in here. And now we're going to execute. And I'm actually going to go in here just to step through it a little bit so you guys can see it hit. So we're going to execute. It's going to hit. We see that string. And remember that when we're doing team, we told it that it had to be this so that it allowed us to pass in a string. And then MongoDB is going to convert it into the object ID that it needs so that it shows, so that it can show kind of like this. So with that being said, we are now going to step through, and it should be able to bring us something back. We see this team object right here, Chicago Bulls, the 3 players, Eastern, and that ID. And now we return it. And we're going to see that same object down here. But now let's go ahead and show you guys how to create. So let's say you wanted to add in a new NBA team to your database. So what you would do is, we really don't need this ID, so we can get rid of that. So let's add in the Phoenix Suns, and I cannot spell Phoenix apparently. They are going to be in the Western Conference, lowercase e. And then we're just going to add one player right now. So it's going to be Kevin Durant. Oh Lord, the Kevin Durant saga, but that's for another day, another channel. So we have Kevin Durant, his number 35, Conference Western Team Phoenix Suns. So again, I'm going to set a breakpoint at the create just so we can kind of see what's going on. We can execute. We're going to see that the team object is coming through. ID is obviously null, but the Western, the player object is coming through. And then we have the team name. So when it's going to go create, it's going to go right here. It's going to insert one team, and we step through. And we're going to see that we are now getting the team ID. The team ID has been inserted here because it's been inserted into the database successfully. We go ahead. We are going to return back the information in here. But if we want proof, we can just go ahead and refresh here. And we're going to see that our object has been set correctly. So the create has worked. And now let's move on to the edit. So now, guys, we're going to test the update. So we're going to expand this. As you guys can see, we're going to need an ID and the object for the team that we're going to actually replace. Because if you guys remember, it goes here and it replaces one. I already put a breakpoint as well in our update method so we can follow along a little bit. But now let's actually replace this object here. So this is the object of the one that we used to create. But now I want to add a new player. So that new player is going to be Devin Booker. So for that, we are going to need to add his name, which is obviously Devin Booker. And then we're going to add in his number. And now that we have this object, we now need the ID. So we're going to go back and we're going to go grab this ID from here. Go back here, put the ID in here, and now let's execute. So as we can see here, we should be getting the team with now 2 players. And we're getting the ID correctly. So now we're going to go and retrieve the team that we're going to update. We're going to check, hey, does this team actually exist? It does exist. So we're not, just checking for something that's actually not there. So now we're going to set that ID. And then we're going to call the update async. And once we do this, we're just going to do continue. And we did get, a 204 that everything was good. So now let's go back here and refresh again. And now we see that players has updated to 2. So if we open this, we should see that we have Devin Booker now and Kevin Durant. So good. And now let's finally test, does delete work, right? Because that's the important one. We now want to delete this. We don't want Phoenix Suns information in our database. We hate them. They've done it all wrong. They've built the team the wrong way, blah, 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 blah. So let's get rid of them. So first of all, we're just going to need a ID here. And it should be the same ID that I already had saved. I'm going to, again, put a breakpoint here just so we can follow a little bit, even though it's not that difficult. So, again, execute. We get that ID. And now we should be able to look, hey, does this team exist? Because if not, we're deleting nothing. So, go through. We did find it. Now, delete async. And if it all goes through, which it should, we again get success. And then go back here. And now we should see that we're back down to 2. And that is how you create a .NET API that uses MongoDB. And now that you know how to create a .NET API with MongoDB, maybe you don't like the idea of your app settings file having your connection strings in them. Well, in that case, watch this video so that you never have to use your app settings file ever again.